Welcome back to part 2 of our conversation with Warren Ropp. We hope you enjoy this episode.
Another little tidbit about problems with aluminum head. I said that it grew so bad.
Yeah.
Well, our injectors, we couldn't keep them sealed on the bottom end because it would grow so big. They would loosen up and then it burned past them.
Right.
Torch past them like you took a torch to them. So I went and found there was a surplus warehouse in Rock Island that Deere send all their extra stuff to. And I spent a day down there looking through stuff, and I found these bevel washers. And so I come back and we cut grooves in the injectors, and we'd stack 4 bevel washers in there, and we'd spring load them, and we could tighten them down, and it'd keep the pressure on as the head grew. But the problem is after we did that a while, the head would soften and it'd push the seat down.
And then you were
So Dan designed a steel plate that went in to the bottom of that head. We machined it, it is like a 3/4 of an inch thick, and we put the head and we milled the head out, and then we put the head in an oven, and then we brought it out and we dropped that steel plate in, and it shrunk down when it cooled, and we bored and cut all the valve seats and stuff in that steel plate, and that injector sealed against them too. Took care of all of our problems. Never had any problems again after that.
Oh, you're kidding me.
Yeah. So we kind of created 2 pieces in that billet head.
So when you're doing all this stuff, were you starting to get other John Deere tractor pullers reaching out to you going, how are you guys getting reliability?
No, we kept it all ourselves.
You didn't tell anyone?
No, we didn't tell nobody nothing. We were just dumb old boys trying to do stuff that we, it was fun to engineer things,
But it's a good method.
Oh, it is.
That's why
people would ask us questions and we'd tell them what we do, but there weren't that many of us pulling John Deere tractors back then.
Really?
They were out there, but they weren't.
So what were the other brands?
Our goal was to be the John Deere tractor because John Deere was not known to be a top runner.
But you guys were competitive.
Yeah, we were always pretty competitive, but nobody had ever won the Grand National circuit in a John Deere since, I don't know, way back when. It'd been a long time.
Had you guys won it?
We won it in 86.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
We had an outstanding year in 86. It was I think we won 4 in a row, and then we went and won the Indy Super Bowl that year, and we could do no wrong.
Right. Well, it's fun when the stars line.
Yeah. Of course.
I feel like they did for me this year, and I don't know why. And I'm not just a regional,
for you now, though.
A regional series. So it'll be fun to go mix it up. I screwed up my last pull really bad. I moved weight and I shouldn't have, and I was going to really lay it to them, and I ended up plowing the front end all the way down the track, but that's another story. You do that stuff. So once you got the valve train and the heads figured out, with that billet head, were you still running, were you at that point a cross flow? Or
we never did cross flow.
Never did cross flow.
We always stayed standard, Siamese-sided cylinder head, yeah.
Interesting. I didn't know if you guys did. I think, a lot of them I think they're all cross flow now.
Even on the Deeres.
Yeah, the Deeres are all.
Who's building that head?
Well, gosh, you're going to ask me.
I'm sure it's a doable thing, but I just didn't realize anybody did it. I know
I've seen Hypermax has heads out there, and the name is slipping my mind. I said it yesterday.
On John Deere tractors?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Well, they're all pretty well billet heads at this point.
Right.
And
but I didn't know if they could adapt them to a John.
No, they are. It's not an IH head. In fact, the thing with the pro stocks, that's, the super stocks, the class you guys were in, probably was a leader in innovation like what you guys did. Like just listening to all these stories, they're still pushing the limits on everything.
Oh, yeah.
And now their blocks, because of what they're going to, they have to have recast blocks. So their girdles are built in. They've got bolts coming in from the sides, and it's a total different setup. They have to.
And that's pretty new, that side bolt.
Yes,
thing.
It is.
The 4-bolt mains and that stuff has been there a while, but I still converse with Esden Lane a lot.
Yep.
And we were talking about that just like 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
About some things, because he just ruined a block, pushed another one, and he was getting one with the bolts in the sides. But he's a Hypermax guy.
And that's where, like locally, we now have Travis Slaba over in Marengo.
Yeah.
In the super stock class. That's kind of where I get some of my education on what they're doing, but
Is that the bone twister?
Yeah, the bone
whatever?
twister.
Yeah.
And he's running a Hypermax block as well. And I know the heads are all recast. The difference, just for the reason I ask about boost and how that changes, I mean, clearly it's volume. And I guess now what they've figured out is to go back to 3 from 4 turbos. They compare them up and get more volume. But his last run this year, trying to think what town he was in, over in Illinois, wasn't Nashville. What was the other town?
Henry.
Oh, geez. It was the day I had my last run. We were watching him on the big screen and at our pool waiting for ours to start. And he literally blew the whole side panel. Looked like he blew the side of the tractor out, but he blew the manifold. It literally blew the manifold apart, which is a billet intake off. And, he said, I guess I know that manifold was good for 350 PSI because at 351 it let go. So,
That's crazy,
when you're putting that kind of, you're talking.
You got to remember that you got that kind of pressure at the bottom of the stroke.
That's
and
exactly
now you're gonna compress
right.
that.
Yeah.
That's why I'm
Tremendous.
surprised it was just the intake manifold.
I am
that blew
too.
off.
But
the rods must be something out of this world now.
But it's what you're talking about. You find the weak point. And I think super stock class, from what I see today, is really our R&D class to this day.
Yeah.
We still, because when you get to the pro stocks, what they've done is try to make a more affordable pulling class. You've got either an International or John Deere block is what they call it. They are identical. The only difference between those them recast blocks, the pumps on one side for a Deere and the other for the red one.
Right.
Heads are the same, pumps, turbos, but it's the only ones that are really different in that class are the Massey's. But if it's running a New Holland AGCO, it doesn't matter what they're running. They're either in that class.
They're going to have that.
It's going to be a John Deere, an International, whatever they choose.
Yeah.
But the fact of the matter is, it's the same damn thing.
Yeah.
And it's just to try to make an affordable class, and yet you can run the NTPA
what do you call
circuit.
an affordable class in the pulling world today? I mean, let's not talk about the bolt-ons on top of the block. Let's talk about the block, the head, and the rotating the base for your engine. Is that a $50,000 chunk of iron up there?
I know. There's a new one that come out of Hypermax 2 weeks ago for right at 30,000.
That's not counting the injection pumps and all this.
That's
stuff.
a basic core block.
Yeah,
that isn't a
that's the
crankshaft. That is just the block.
Not even a crank.
No crank. Your crank's billet. Those
The
are
word affordable seems kind of.
Well, at my level, I consider it affordable, but I'm probably spending
Back
more
in our
money
day,
than you
that's
guys.
a lot. That would.
Yeah.
We didn't spend that kind of money. No. It might not last so long.
Which I'll give a little tip just to the crowd. I mentioned Kenny Sanders earlier. We're going to have him on. And he was telling me that the whole time he ran that 666 with 4 turbos, he never put a new motor part in it. He was an IH mechanic.
Yeah.
And he would get a hold of local dealers, and every time they overhauled it, he got the cranks, the pistons, blocks, and it kind of got to where he had to balance the crank, because that was an odd crank when he started putting that kind of pressure to it to help it hold. His hope was that he could get 7 passes without taking the bottom end out. I don't know. What were you guys at?
Well, in '86 when we won, we ran all season.
You did.
Yeah, never.
So by that point,
never had a failure.
So at that point,
Liability
in '86, you guys were able to run a motor.
Yeah, reliability was the name of the game.
What was the number of hooks you guys had?
I don't know, because we ran multiple classes. We probably ran 35, 40 hooks that summer.
Really? Yeah, you probably did.
We run everywhere. We'd run state, we'd run regional, we'd run Grand National.
And you ran, and then you did all the pull-offs.
And the pull-offs, yeah.
And that was always a big deal. And the pull-off, then they'd weight it or
just reweight it.
Just reweight it, and then you'd go again.
Yeah. Occasionally they would re-gear maybe the sled so the box came up quicker or something like that. But
if it was close.
Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting. So you always ran a stock block.
Yep.
And then did you run roller lifters or anything like that at that point?
Well, I got to ask a dumb question. What do you call a lower lifter?
Roller.
No,
roller.
We never did go to a roller. We thought about it at one point in time. about as far as in the valve train, probably the biggest thing we ever did is try to run needle bearing rocker arms.
Okay.
And
which is probably pretty customary now.
Yeah. I mean, I have a set of them that we never even put in. I got them laying there somewhere. I don't even know what they would fit now for ratios,
What about a camshaft?
Camshaft was a billet camshaft. I'm trying to think who. I think Crowder. I think Crowder built some camshafts for us.
Which they're big in clutches now.
We would actually get them. What's that?
They're big in clutches now.
Yeah, we ran Crowder clutches.
Yeah.
Oh, they called the master clutch. It was a big. But the Crowder, the cam, we had a company in Chicago, Midwest Crankshaft. They were grinding our camshafts for us.
Okay.
That was another issue, was trying to find durability and compatibility with a lifter that would stand up against a billet camshaft, because it'd eat them up if it was the wrong material. So we'd have to chrome coat and when you talk chrome, it's not shiny chrome, it's a different type of chrome that they'd fire onto the head of the lifter,
right?
And then you'd have to grind it and everything,
break it in.
I mean, so there's all those little weird things that you'd have to
do
to modify it so it'd even live.
So 86, when you guys won the national championship, you guys didn't tear that motor down once all year. You're kidding me.
No.
That was an incredible feat in that time.
We might have put some turbos on.
Right.
But
there
other
was
than
no
going internally on that.
Because that's an incredible feat. I think this year's Colin Ross, and they're out of Pennsylvania, I believe they damn near grenaded a motor. I mean, a lot of them. But they're pushing it to the limits. And, unfortunately or unfortunately, whether we like it or not, I think there's now some leadership coming over to the NTPA from the NHRA is what I'm hearing. Somebody's going to listen to this and tell me I'm crazy.
Well, I heard.
But that's what I've heard. And I think, it's going to, I'm just going to say we're on a timeline to get to where you're going to have a team like that and things are going to really escalate in that part of the sport. I know there's people really trying to hold that back because, for an example, like they've got to sign up for these pools. I think Travis Slaball won it 2 years in a row in 21 and 22. He's doing 14 to 15 hooks a year. And with that, he's probably changing a motor or two in there. And so, and I'm going to guess just the cost of that motor is more than you guys had in your whole tractor, and maybe more than what you spent the entire year back in those days.
Probably.
But, if you escalate that and you have to start pushing them so hard, which is parts start blowing off the side, when that happens and you're tearing them down, you're just, you're probably 4 or 5xing the price tag, because now you're going to have sponsors. You're going to have a team of mechanics.
What's paying the bill? I realize that when back in our time, you were basically. I still remember this. We had some companies that come up that asked Dad that they want to get involved and they want to help sponsor us.
Right.
And Dad said, I don't want to be responsible to have to go somewhere and be somewhere at a given time, a day or 2 days ahead of an event to,
right.
I want to do our show, run our program, and I don't want to have to answer to anybody.
Right.
So we never went down that road. But I know back in the day, there were some people that got some pretty big corporate sponsorships that even though they got big money, they lost big money because of exactly that. They had to go somewhere, be at a location for 2 days ahead of time. And these are people that they were farmers.
Right.
They were hog farmers, or they were having to pay somebody else to do their job while they were gone.
Right.
And it didn't work out.
Right.
I mean, I won't mention names, but these were big name guys that they were the ones to watch.
Well, and that's and I won't mention names either, but that's why there's guys today that could pick up sponsors and don't want to. And they don't want to see that trend happen because they still want to go back to their shop with a buddy or two and tear the tractor down and do all the work.
I don't even know what the prize money is nowadays, but back then, if you won a grand national event, if you got $1,000 to win that thing, that was
good,
pretty good money.
Yeah, yeah.
But then we weren't paying $3.50, $4 for diesel fuel a gallon,
Right.
and we weren't,
Right.
and we
Yeah.
obviously weren't traveling in big super hauler rigs and
Right.
and living in them, and
Right.
we were very, very seldom do we stay in a motel. We would live in the truck and everything else.
Right. Right. It was out and back or
Yeah,
sleep
now
in
it's
the
like
truck seat.
It's like it's a circus. Almost,
Yeah. No, it's changed a lot. On the local circuits, our prize money is still, the lowest I've seen it that I ran with one organization was, I think, $175. I kind of did it because of location.
You do it low of the sport.
And I knew the guy that was kind of promoting it and wanted me to come down, with ECI or East Central Iowa Tractor Pullers, it's $450 for first place, and then it drops back, $50 and pays out the first.
Like, we're in the racing world now, and I always said the racers weren't the smartest people in the world, because if we were, we wouldn't be doing it, because we're not doing it for the money.
No.
We're doing it for the love of the sport,
right.
and the people that you meet, and
right.
And that's what it's about. It really
is.
And I think even if you get into the NHRA and you get into all, it's about the people. You ever go to one of those events? It's about the people.
Yeah.
I mean, that's something I've got to be fortunate enough to get to know some people in the drag racing world.
Right.
And that's what we do now, is we go to drag races and we go to NASCAR races, and we just got to know people that it's about the people.
Oh,
I get bored to death watching a race sometimes.
Yeah. But if you can go have dinner with them before and after and hang out, I would agree with that. I think that's the big thing. I mentioned that earlier, just all the people I got to know this last year, and it's like the doors are just continuing to open, and now it's on a broader scale that I'm getting to know people across the country. So that's been a lot of fun. People are so helpful, and I feel like it's really gives us the heart of what our country is. It's still there. I mean, there's a lot of good people.
There's still hope.
Oh, there's hope. There's a lot of good people.
Let's not go down that road.
No, we're not doing that. Not in this one. Manifolds, you were running stock manifolds yet at that point?
I think the last manifold we had, I think, was aluminum manifold that was used on stock production.
Really? Okay.
If I'm not mistaken, I believe it was.
No, I'm running, like, even on my tractor, I'm running a billet manifold, aluminum, and it's 3 times the size of
they're huge.
Of the original.
It's like a barrel.
Right. And they're, and you get them all shaped, and it's a 3-piece manifold, and it's pretty crazy how that all has changed. And they're starting to do a lot of stuff with building out like headers and exhaust and different things there on the exhaust side. We're still not too crazy on that, other than matching up the ports and things. But clutches then, once you kind of got the motor all pieced together to where it would hold, what were you doing on clutches?
So we did away with the perma clutch. Which worked really, really well for what it was designed to do. We locked the PTO side into the traction clutch side, and we had couplers built, and those were all blueprinted designs that Deere supplied.
Right.
And we'd build them, and they worked. But then when that became a problem where it didn't work, and we were still running a 2-speed for a while there.
Really?
And then that would kind of give up. And so then we went to the, that Crowder clutch, which I think was a 12-inch clutch, 12.5-inch clutch, maybe 11, something like that. Okay. But we've got to remember, we weren't running component tractors. We were running we still had that big cast clutch housing,
Yes. Yes.
So, okay, how are you going to adjust the clutch in a Crowder slipper clutch through a cast thing? Because you didn't want to weaken the casting at all.
Right.
So we had a little itty bitty hole about that big in the bottom of that thing, and I'd go up in there and I'd adjust all them stands every week through that little bitty hole. You could go in there and I could get a wrench on, and I built wrenches and stuff, so I get in and I dial them and I tighten them up.
And then keep turning it.
But if your clutches went bad, you have to split the tractor and you go through. Right. And that's not like doing a component tractor where you just pull a bell housing or a drive shaft or a what.
Today, when they say component, I don't have a component tractor.
You still got a normal casting in
I got for my rear end housing.
Right.
And so what when they call it a component is when they're going to like a 2.5 ton truck rear end.
Yeah. And a drive shaft in the middle there.
I
somewhere
think it's,
to a gearbox.
I think it's, I mean, yeah, to me, I have a component tractor, but that's not what they're calling it because we have to run the rear housing. I think a lot of the John Deere guys are running 3010 rear ends. I run a 706 rear end.
But it's basically a gutted housing, isn't it?
It's completely gutted. We're shaving weight off of, we have bull gears. John Deere has a little different setup.
Planetaries.
Billet carriers to hold our rear ends or our differential in place. I wouldn't be able to hold it otherwise. And then we've got a coupler coming right off that with a big solid shaft, where before it was hollow because they'd run another one through it, but it's a hollow. I mean, it's a solid and it goes into a 5-speed. I use a Profab, but there's a lot. Atlas does a lot of them.
I know those guys from way back when. They've been doing it. They've been doing that forever. We used was Ron Perry, called Perry Transmissions.
I heard his name recently.
They were kind of crude, straight cut gears, but they worked.
Yeah, they went into the regular housing.
When he built the counter shaft. You still used the stock pinion shaft.
Yes,
but the counter shaft, he built the counter shaft, and he built the top shaft.
Really?
And yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, there was nothing synchronized about anything.
No.
But it was all collared and it was pretty. But they worked.
So
I mean, you could buy a different gear for if you wanted something to work.
Because Atlas did a lot of that, and there's still guys out there running with the original housings on some of the lower classes.
Yeah.
And but by the time you get to the 8500 Limited Pros, and then when you get to even the light limiteds, where they're intercooled 65 or 6,800 pounds, those things, and the variance in weight there again is if it's alcohol or diesel fuel. But
sure.
Those guys. Yeah, we've got to make sure you got the rear ends to hold up. Now, it's pretty well bulletproof at this point, but, it's just, we hog the housing out and you got a little 5-speed sitting there with straight cut gears.
Yeah.
And
it just drops in and bolts in.
It drops right in, bolts right up, and then you got a coupler where the clutch and everything. And it's pretty slick setup compared to me. It's a component. To me, but we're still using for the red tractors, we're using the rear end housing. I think a lot of the other colors may be using their brands, but there's some of them, depending on the class, they're mixing and matching depending on what the rules are. But I think like the Atlas guys have got to find their own rear end, and then they're running like an Atlas or a Profab.
They still got a rear end kind of like International, do they not?
Yeah,
a bull gear type
they
system?
do. And then for the motors, if you're red, like in our class, if you're red or green, you got to run that block in head configuration. And then if you're orange or olive or whatever else you are, they're running Cummins for the most part.
Do you feel that any certain manufacturer has an advantage over another one based on maybe the possibility of the way that thing was designed in the first place? If they really got creative, would anybody have an advantage?
I really don't. I don't think anymore.
Not with the component stuff.
Not with the way things are today. I don't think it does so much. In fact, if you get to the pro stocks, the John Deeres are pretty well cleaning up in there. But again,
a lot of them too.
Yeah, there's a lot of them. On the super stocks, they're still mostly internationals for whatever reason. I don't understand that. But then when you get into all the other levels, I think with the Outlaws last year in our class was a John Deere won that series. We don't have a lot locally, and part of that I think is your old tractor, the Iron Elk. I believe I found some video this year, unless it was something on YouTube from last year when I was doing some research, is still pulling in northwest Missouri over in there. And a lot of those old tractors are still running, and it's amazing if they did things to the rear ends and the gearboxes like you did, depending on the class they're in, they can drop back and still keep pulling it and not have to spend that crazy amount of money. So I'm sure, I shouldn't say I'm sure, I don't know what class that tractor's in. It may be
I
back
think
to
it's what they call hot farm stock or something like
Oh,
that.
so it's a single turbo. Yeah.
Yeah,
It's
I think it is.
They're running pretty much a stock block, probably doing something with the head.
I'm not 100% sure the guy's name that owns it right now, but
I found it. Yeah.
I think he told me that as a kid, he helped Dave Hager with his sled.
Really?
Dave Hager was out of Missouri, and he said, I always liked that tractor. I always said one day I want to own that tractor. And he called me up, probably been 4 or 5 years ago now, and says, hey, I just want you to know I own your tractor.
Really? So
Yeah.
that's not the original owner. Where did it go when it left your shop?
Oh, we sold it to a Frank Keener. Frank Keener was in Ohio.
Okay.
Frank Keener ran it for a year, and then he sold it to a Heath Wheelow. And then he ran it a couple years, and then he sold it back to Frank Keener's dad, Dwayne Keener.
Okay.
And then Dwayne Keener ran it a couple years. And then he sold it to a guy. I don't know if it's the guy in Missouri now or if it's one guy in between there. But
it ended up
in Missouri, and that's where it's at today.
Yeah.
But this was a young kid that helped Hager back in the day, and he called me and said, I own your tractor, which is kind of cool.
That is really cool. That is really cool. You got to appreciate that. That's somebody that had set a goal or a dream years ago and ends up getting it. Yeah. No, it's still competing, but you're seeing that happen a lot. The thing that's interesting, though, to me is, are we good to go again? Okay. So to me, though, a lot of these kids, like in the 80s, I kind of lost track of it because the sport was kind of in a reset. And we were always like, well, is tractor pulling going to go away? What's going to happen? Of course, I'm a young farm kid. Ag economy wasn't great. So we got into motorcycle, dirt bikes and demo derbies and race cars and whatever else we could to have our fun.
Been in all the above.
Yeah. So now, after all these years, though, it just kept sitting there, and I finally got to a point I had to get back into it. So to pick your brain on that, one thing that, or to sit down with you and do this today, I think is, I love it because there's a lot of people, it's amazing to me out of a lot of different things I've done in my life. When I started this hobby, how quickly fans and people just connected and resonated with it. Of course, we have social media, but I mean, I've got people all over the United States that have started to follow it and reach out and just share ideas. The Iron Elk has come up more than once just because of where I live. People will message me, hey, do you know those? I'm like, well, yeah, I golf with the one son, Myron, Ernie's one son. Of course, he's always telling me, you blow it up yet? You blow it up yet? You're going to blow it up. And I'm like, yeah, we're a little lower level and it's not as aggressive as it once was. But that's, there's a huge evolution with all of that. So when your dad, though, to kind of wrap a cap up on this thing here with the tractor pulling side of it, because I want to get on to some other things you're into, the NTPA, was that series, when was it formed? Do you know, was he part of that?
He wasn't the founder by any means, but he was heavily involved because when that became more of a national sport, there was John Klug,
yes,
who was out of, I think, southern Iowa.
Yes.
He was heavily involved in it, but he was an Iowa puller.
Right.
So he was always at our state pulls and so obviously Dad knew him through that. But he was involved in the board at one point in time with the NTPA.
Okay.
And I don't know that he had anything to do with any rules committees or anything like that.
Right.
But I think it's just to organize the whole organization. He had some input because he'd been around it a long time. Dave Schreier, I don't know if he was the first president of the NTPA, and I know his son was involved in it also after Dave passed.
So then for a local circuit, you guys had what? What was this? What was that called back then?
It was the Iowa Tractor Pulling Association.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what led to the demise? Do you know what led to the demise of that association, or what happened?
I just think it was just I think it kind of stayed as that, but then it kind of became that Eastern Iowa.
Yeah. Okay. So that's kind of what it morphed into.
The thing of it was, you had back then when there's the Iowa Tractor Pulling Association, you had Bob Chickering.
Yes.
In a modified tractor with an Allison aircraft engine or a Sox Ford engine or something like that. And Bob Chickering, Jerry Fornash.
Right.
Out of, Westchester. Ron Headley.
Yes.
Emil
Murda.
Jack Simon, Emil Murda.
Well, Jack's boys are still really into tractor pulling, and they're putting a huge push and a lot of money into it.
Well, see, it's kind of like when you get out of something, you don't follow it. You just kind of step away, and and I didn't realize that,
Yeah.
But no, you're talking. No, wait a minute. You're confused.
I got two Simons confused.
You got this, yeah. Jack Simons had a little Oliver alcohol tractor.
You're right.
He fought that forever and ever out of West Liberty, but he always
okay. That's a different.
It was a Cockshut.
Yes.
It was a brand of the tractor. Simons was Roger Simons.
That's who I was thinking of.
Boys.
Yes.
Yeah, they're into it big time, no doubt. Roger, he has since passed. I think it's probably been 3-4 years ago now.
I think so, yeah.
Something like that. But Roger was a good friend of ours. When we were running the Grand National Circuit and traveling all over the place, Roger was right there with us.
Yeah.
I mean, we were right there with him,
What was he pulling at that time?
He was pulling two-wheel drive trucks.
Yeah.
And then he was like Simon Says was what his trucks were. But now the boys, they're into the pro stocks and the modifieds and the buying and the selling of the haulers and the transporters. They got the trucking company and the farming companies and all the stuff, but
they've got
Roger, I would like to say this about Roger. When Dad passed away on July 2nd, our hometown poll was like 2 weeks away.
Really?
In Kelowna.
Yep.
And the last poll that we'd been to, we didn't realize it, but at Toma, when Dad passed away, on that run that I made, we melted down the motor. We didn't know that. I didn't, you don't look at things like that after what we'd just been through.
Right.
Well, we had a poll coming up 2 weeks. It was our hometown poll. And it was going to be kind of in memory of Dad.
Right.
And I went to unload the tractor and started and I found out I had all these issues, and so, oh man, how are we going to do it? We got to pull at our pole.
Right.
We cannot pull at this pole.
It's literally
and so we busted our buns and we tore it down because all our pistons were all custom made.
Right.
They were, I think, Staub Machine out of Wisconsin was building our pistons.
Right.
So we got them to build us a set of pistons quick, and we set of sleeves and we put it all back together. Roger Simons came to that pole, and he wouldn't have had to because he was a Grand National puller. He wasn't a state puller type guy.
But that was quite an event. I recall.
He came down and he pulled and he gave all of his winnings back in memory of Dad.
Oh, you're kidding me.
We actually ended up winning both classes that night.
Did you really?
With our tractor,
I was there, but I wouldn't.
It was a pretty emotional night that night, but I'll never forget. Roger wouldn't have had to done that.
Yeah. They're a stand-up family, and they give tremendously back to the sport. They've, got a semi they're pulling now. I think their effort is almost to get involved in all areas they can.
And they put that big pull on at Farley.
Yeah, and they're putting a really high stakes one on. They don't have my class, but it's a $2,500 entry, and I think they're paying $35,000 back to the winner. And that's unprecedented.
That's almost full.
Yeah, it is. Some of the classes are full, so completely. So, no, they've been a good family. I just didn't know. Really what all that history was. I imagine late 80s, 90s is kind of when some of the local circuits kind of reorganized. I mean, eventually we end up with Outlaws and PPL, and then some of them have affiliates.
Well, we had all those guys pass away.
Yeah, and there was kind of a gap
there. To pick it up and to run with it again. There are some out there that are involved in pulling, but I don't know that they really had the time that it would require to run an organization.
Right.
And a lot of the people were getting up there in age.
They were. And it seems like there's a lot of younger folks in their 30s and 40s getting back. When I say younger, I guess it's young for me now, but they're getting into this sport and they're really putting effort back into it. I know ECI basically, I think, is the remnants of what you guys had. And then but that's actually a merger. Some of the classes come in from another association that was kind of out there. And there's some strong leadership. I think they're 28 years in running now, and our numbers are going up. The classes are getting bigger. We're probably at a point where we're having, we had 19 scheduled hooks this year, which usually they try to get them between 15 to 18. In our class, some of the classes aren't quite as much. We've seen a shift with some of that, but it's certainly, there's a lot of growth in the sport. And I think one of the things that's made a difference for us today is all the things that you said about all the R&D and the things you did. When I can go put a tractor together and feel pretty confident about running it a full year and doing nothing but maintenance, and now I'm going to tear it down, put bearings and rings in it and probably a valve job, and, we'll look for a few updates here and there, but you're back on the track. You're
Right.
not tearing it apart. You guys literally were engineering as you went, and every year you had to keep doing it. So that's a testament to all the effort and the money you guys spent. I'm just saying, like, the generation of people that did to get it where it's at. I know once your dad passed, I think you campaigned one more year. Is that
That's
right?
correct. Yeah.
And I know you told me that it just wasn't the same. It wasn't fun like it was before. You want to talk about that a little bit, that transition, and then where you ended up?
Yeah. Yeah. So I've always kind of been a little bit of a gearhead, you may say. It was like, so motorsports of any type always intrigued me, or I was interested in,
Right.
I didn't always expect to be a participant
Right.
in any of them, really. I just kind of got that way. And I wanted to tell you this one little story here. The first time I ever got to pull the tractor,
Yes.
it was Antique Acres in Denver, Iowa, up north of Waterloo.
Yep.
And we're on our way to the pole, just Dad and I. And he says, "Would you like to pull the tractor today?" And I go, "What?" He says, "Yeah, would you like to pull the tractor today?" And I says, "Well, don't ask me again," because I said, "Heck yeah, I
Yeah.
want to do that." So I'd driven the tractor around the lot because I'd work on it. I'd do all the work on
Right.
it, and I could drive it around, and I'd load it, and I'd do all the stuff, but I'd never pulled it. So we get there, and it's my turn to pull. So I go up there, and Dad's got it weighted like he thinks it ought to be, so
Right.
I'm ready to go, so I hook on and I throttle that thing up, and down the track I go, and I'm carrying the front end, and I'm flying. I mean, I never felt anything like it in my life, that kind of horsepower, And I went out the end, and I pulled the throttle back, and I dropped the front end so hard it threw the weights off, and I got disqualified. That was my first time I ever pulled, and I thought, I'm hooked. This is awesome.
So you
I
didn't
never
have
felt
to,
that kind of horsepower before.
So you didn't have to tie down your weights.
We didn't have them tied down. I guess
Right.
we thought maybe we didn't need to or something.
Right.
But we used to, then we started strapping them on. And,
Right.
I mean,
That's
these weren't the front
interesting.
weights. These weren't sideways. These were, just bounced it hard enough and threw them all off. If you threw anything off, you got DQ'd.
Yeah, right. Still the
So
fact today.
that was my first deal. But so that was my beginning.
About
of
mid-track, I
tractor
think
pulling.
everybody experiences it the first time down. They can't stop me.
Yeah. Well,
You
I
got
don't
so
even
much
remember if
speed.
somebody had walked out, I'd have ran right over them because I'm just like in awe. And I'm
Yeah.
going, holding on for
But
dear life.
they'll bring you to your knees at the other end if you give them time.
Yeah. So we got, that was my beginning to the tractor pulling world.
Yeah.
But so I got into a little bit of cross-country snowmobile racing way back
Okay.
in the beginning. I did the 500-mile race from St. Paul, Minnesota to Winnipeg, Canada. I did that 2 years.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
That was kind of not sponsored by Deere, but it was a Deere sled. Deere did get involved after my second year. They got involved a little bit and helped us out. But that's an experience in itself because you're dealing with elements, the weather,
Right.
It's like 20, 30 below, and you're And the whole thing is it's timed. You have to meet a certain timeline each day to be qualified for the next day. I think the first year we ran, there was 800 and some sleds started that race. I made it to the second day and buried it, and I couldn't get it out. The sleds were really, really heavy, and so I didn't make it past the second day.
So that would have been late 90s, early 90s.
Yeah, and then the second year I went up and I was running 54th out of about that many again, and they canceled the event because the weather was so bad. The state troopers and all the law enforcement were too busy taking care of accidents and things that were going on, and they couldn't mark the roads for us.
Right.
And we couldn't move it to the another day because everything was booked for Winterfest in Winnipeg. So we couldn't get motel rooms when we got there. So they just canceled the event. So that in itself was an experience, the Snowmobile thing. And then we got into the tractor pulling thing, and when we started running the lower class, that's when I started running it more, and Dad would run the 9,500 pound class, and I'd run the 7,500 pound class. And we were no longer running the 12,200 pound class anymore.
So it was just those two
classes, and we shared driving times with that. And then eventually it got to where the tractor got a little more wild and a little more horsepower. And I think Dad decided, well, he's just going to, step back and kind of let me run it a little bit more. And I did. And then Dad passed away of a heart attack in Tomah, Wisconsin in 1994.
Okay.
And like you said, we tried to do it another year, but it wasn't the same.
Right.
And then I had several people that contacted us. Bill Voorhees was one of them. He's a modified puller now, but back then he was a super stock puller, international guy. And he had offered to buy the tractor and trade. I think he had a collector Corvette or something that as partial payment for the tractor, and I didn't know anything about that for sure. So I called up Carl Moyer Chevrolet. And by the way, my condolences. Carl just passed away 2 days ago.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I did not know that.
Anyway, so I called Carl up because I knew Carl was a big Corvette guy.
Right.
And I says, Carl, I got this deal. We have a pulling tractor. Guy wants to buy it. He wants to trade a collector Corvette in. What's the Corvette worth? Blah, blah, blah. And we talked, and he says, what are you going to do if you're not going to tractor pull anymore? I says, I don't know. He says, well, he was the Legends car dealer for the state of Iowa at the time. He owned Eddyville Speedway, the drag race, but they also had an oval track at the end of it. He says, why don't you and your wife come down and try driving a Legends car sometime, So on our 20th wedding anniversary, my wife and I went down there and we spent a whole day at Eddyville running Legends cars.
Really?
I got hooked. We bought a Legends car. And so we've been racing Legends cars for 28 years now. We're still doing it.
Right.
We were a dealer for 13 years.
I thought so.
But we just sold out to Griffin McGrath. It's Legends Direct is the name of the company now, and he's blowing it up big. Yeah. So we're now involved in Legends car racing, but kind of at a lot lower level than what we were at one point in time. Now what we do is we promote a series called Racing for a Cause.
Okay.
And
I've seen you do
that.
That
brings me to the shirt that I'm wearing today.
Right.
Is we raise awareness and funds for the COPS Foundation. Okay. And the COPS stands for Concerns of Police Survivors.
Okay.
Our son is a police officer.
Okay.
And so we promote racing events, and we sell T-shirts and things like that. Different locations around Iowa, Wisconsin, Missouri. Working on trying to put one together in Florida maybe this winter.
Yep.
So I'm proud to say my wife and I have worked hard at this. Like I say, my son's a police officer. What got us involved in it, a good friend of ours who was a police officer, lost his life in 2008. His name was Danny Martinez Jr., and helping a lady during a domestic abuse situation. I left behind a wife and 5 kids.
Oh my goodness.
And so in 2010, we got involved with another gentleman, and we started doing this. It was just caused, we started the Racing for a Cause events. This will be our 16th year now. We raised over $200,000 that we've donated to the COPS Foundation, both the National Foundation and the Iowa chapter.
Okay.
And different chapters. And what that does, it helps families that have lost a member of the family. It helps them go to retreats and helps them get through the grieving process and stuff like that. So that's what we do now. That's kind of consumes a lot of our time.
Right.
But so it's not so much about going in circles to us anymore. It's more about trying to do what we do.
You know, I think that's something that happens as we as humans get older. We start to, a lot of times when we're young, we do a lot of things because it's just straight up, it's fun. And we have a lot of energy, and you love the rush of all of that. And I think as we grow older, we start to look at significance a lot more, how we can give back and help others that are less fortunate or experiencing difficult times. I think one thing that I can just imagine, I know for you, losing your father suddenly like you did, and pretty young, really, somebody that was that prominent. I can speak for myself, losing my father. When you deal with grief and you see kids losing a loved one, it's something that's just kind of near and dear to you. So I appreciate what you guys do with that. I've been fortunate enough to serve on a hospice board with your wife, and she's just as wonderful as you are. So you guys have done tremendous to the community that you grew up in to give back to it. One of the things, I guess, on the Legends cars, you guys got in, that sport was kind of taken off. And it's kind of like some of, that was probably one option to do rather than the tractor pulling that I'm doing now, was probably the other thing I looked at the most, but eventually I settled on this. It was a pretty new sport when you got involved. And for those that don't know much about Legends, that's basically you buy a chassis, you've got you're running pretty stringent guidelines on motors and things like that, right?
Right. There's a rule package. INEX is the name of the sanctioning body. And for the most part, people will just go buy a car.
Right.
Turnkey situation. You can buy used cars. There's all over there, anywhere from $3,000 to $20,000.
Yeah.
The newer stuff is going to cost you more, obviously.
Right.
But you've got weight rules. You've got right side weight rule, a rear weight rule. That way, it doesn't make any difference whether you got to be 12 years old at least to run one, unless you've raced something prior to and somebody signs off on you.
Okay.
But I'm in what you call the Golden Masters division.
There you go.
Which means you had to be over 50 years old, which I've exceeded by 20 years. But there's the Young Lions, there's the semi-pro, there's the Masters, there's the Gold Masters, and there's the Pro. Those are the divisions. Okay. But we all run together depending on our numbers. Right. If our numbers aren't big enough, we still all run together.
And then you just break it down from there.
Break it down from points from there, right.
So this network's pretty much across the entire United States.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, there's probably, I don't know what it is today, but there's over 8,000 Legends cars running in the U.S. and Europe.
So when you start to see a lot of these drivers get into NASCAR, a lot of them have probably spent time in Legends cars.
They actually have, quite Dale Jr., for example, started in a Legends car. Yeah. The Bush brothers were both in Legends cars.
Now their kids are getting into that.
Logano and all them guys. They were all in a Legends car at one point in time,
What are the 13 years you sold Legends cars in the state of Iowa? Was it like a territory type of thing, or how did that work?
It supposedly was protected, protected territories, but I kind of got involved as a dealer because I could see it maybe kind of going away a little bit, I thought, well, we got to, the guys that were maybe the dealers at the time on who I bought out, I didn't think they were maybe doing enough to promote the sport.
Right.
not saying that we did any better job, but at least we kept it alive. You know, we got ourselves back into tracks that we were there once, and then they dropped us.
Right.
So we got them back in there again. But Legends Direct today is doing an outstanding job doing that. I mean, he's turned it into a $1 million business, and he's got a series, and he's got, you know, it's no problem when they put a series event on there. You know, you're fighting to make the feature. Right. You know,
it's gotten very competitive.
Yeah, and everybody's always, and I believe this: if you can drive a Legends car, you can drive anything. Yeah. I mean, they are difficult to drive because the weight is 1,300 pounds minimum, and you're talking 150 horse. You know, and so I'm a dirt racer. I started out running asphalt. But that's also a
short wheelbase.
Short wheelbase. But I used to run asphalt and dirt for the first 5 years, and then I just got multiple cars and ran one on dirt, run on asphalt, and now I just have multiple cars and somebody else runs one and I run the dirt stuff, you know. Right. And my son's getting involved, you know. Okay. And he's a police officer, but if his schedule allows it, he loves to go run it, and it's a great release for him. Right. And that to me gives me more satisfaction than even running myself anymore. It's just watching somebody else run.
I will say, just even getting involved in tractor pulling, being able to do it with my son, that was worth more than going down the track.
Oh, it's great.
You got to spend that time with family. It's amazing. So
that's one thing about spending time with family. You know, that's one thing with Dad and I. You know, that was our deal. I probably didn't spend as much time with my kids as I should have because I was spending a lot of time with my dad on weekends. You know? But we did go pulling together as a family also. But that's one thing that on the weekend, if we were going to go to a pull, let's say we were going to go to Ohio or to New York, you know, it was not unusual for us because we were running Grand National. Right. To drive thousands of miles to get somewhere to a pull. And the first thing Dad would say when we got done is, we got to get home and get to work tomorrow. I got to see if anybody sold anything, you know. But Dad and I, you know, we would talk about things that maybe we wouldn't normally talk about.
Right. Because you had all that windshield time.
You know, and he would start singing or humming a song or something. And I mean, those are the things I miss.
Yeah. No, it's, I'm glad you had those memories with him. They're just so meaningful. What are some of the most, were there any people you sold cars to that kind of stick out in your mind that would be, when I say famous, that people in the racing world would know?
No, we didn't deal with that kind of people. Okay. I mean, we dealt with, you know,
I thought
they're important to me, you know, but they're just normal people that want to get involved in racing. You know?
I thought Tony Stewart bought one from you once.
No, Tony didn't, but his dad and I have become really good friends through Racing Legends cars. Right. And obviously I've met Tony and got to know him, but Nelson and I are still, you know, we're still in contact all the time, you know, and Nelson still runs a Legends car. He's 86 years old. What is he? Something like that. So,
he's still out there doing it.
So he's still out there doing it, and he's pretty competitive, you know. Right. But I got to know him. Probably I guess you get to meet people like that. Right. Yeah.
From another question, if you're going to all the different things you did, I know you grew up in the implement business, very involved, you know, there, and then you got into tractor pulling, snowmobiles, race cars or Legends cars. Out of all of that, fortunately for you, you were kind of in a platform where some of those things, I mean, that's the way it is for all of us. Sometimes certain things align and we get opportunities. I think sometimes people don't take opportunities when they see them either because they don't recognize them. Clearly, your dad was the kind of guy that probably I can tell from all you and your brothers that you guys were the type of people that if there was an opportunity, you could see it. And some people don't. But through all those experiences and opportunities, what's some advice you'd give somebody? Kind of putting you on the spot with this one.
Yeah. It's,
you didn't expect it to go deep right away.
Well, I guess what I'm going to say is this, I'm going to go like this. don't take anything for granted, and appreciate your opportunities.
Yep.
Because sometimes there'll be a life-changing experience
Right.
that, and I had one of those.
Right.
And so does my wife.
Right.
And so that makes us think of things differently and how we approach things and your timelines.
Yep.
You know, what do you want to accomplish?
Yep.
How much time do you got to accomplish them? Try to be a good example,
Yep.
maybe. I'm myself and my brothers and my whole family are fortunate to have had being born into the family of Ernie and Ardith Ropp.
Right.
We don't take that for granted.
Nope. I know you don't.
I don't know how you'd ever change. I wouldn't change a thing.
Yeah.
Other than maybe wish I was younger again,
Yeah,
you know,
but-
and maybe get into pulling and kick your butt or something like that. Or,
Well,
know,
you probably
again.
could with all the experience you have, I'm sure. You know, that's great advice to pass on. When I look at that, I think a lot of times we look like, oh gosh, you know, this person got this break or this bad thing happened to us, like you know, losing your father and different experiences people have. But, you know, I can tell today, and this is something I have told people more than once because I was 15 when I lost Dad. People would come through and they try to help, you know, encourage you and help you feel better. And they'd tell you, well, time heals. And I always tell people bullshit. All time does is helps you learn to live with it. Because that whole, and I can tell from your emotion today, and I'm emotional just saying this, and I've done this often enough, so my viewers have seen me emotional on here. There are some things that you've learned from your father. There's things I learned from my father that have absolutely shaped who I am as a human. And it's going on into the next generation. It goes on into the people around us. I couldn't tell you which one of my sisters. I know they cleaned your parents' house for a period of time. I remember begging to go down there with them to clean house because I just wanted to see if he had trophies and photos in there of the sport that, you know, we admired him so much. And so, you know, you guys did so much for your community. The whole family did. And I thank you guys for that. It's that's a big deal to give back to the community and the sports that we love. People look up locally at role models, and we need those. When I look back over my life, I'm sure you and I both can go, well, we do this one a little different if we had a second chance. But you know, the beauty is we don't. We've got to figure it out as we go.
Right.
But no, you guys had a wonderful family. What you guys did for tractor pulling is amazing because I can travel to just about any state. And if they're old enough, they'll remember the Iron Elk and how competitive that John Deere was back there in that sport. Starting this podcast, I wanted you on here first because of what it meant to me. And the other thing is, in 1970, the year I was born, my dad bought an 820 John Deere utility because at the time, and we were a red family, but at the time there was they had the torque amplifiers and they would freewheel when forward. So he didn't feel it was safe for us. And John Deere had come out with a live PTO. And so the year I was born, they bought that tractor and it was sitting across the street down there where the brewery's at. There's a salon there now.
Right.
And my oldest brother drove it home at 14 miles an hour. And I have raked hay on that thing for hours. And that tractor will probably never leave our farm just because of, it may not mean much to you guys, but it means a lot to our family that was the tractor he bought new off of Ernie. And even though my dad respected your father so much, even when there was a red tractor that got traded in, he would try to buy it from you guys. And I don't mean this disparaging because times have changed, but that dealership's not the same now that your family's not involved. So it's been wonderful to work with you guys over the years. Didn't matter what kind of equipment it was, you could go in there and they could probably match up a seal hoses, belts, chains, all those things, of course, too. But it was a wonderful
We give credit
experience.
to our good people that we had there, because
You
that's
did.
what makes the business.
You
It's
did.
the people. It's not the building. It's the people that you have.
It is, but good people attract good people.
That's true.
If you see somebody who's a hard ass and doesn't know how to manage people, they usually don't have great employees because they don't want to stick around and work for them. So thank you, Warren, for joining me on the first episode of Breaking Barriers podcast. I tremendously appreciate it.
Well, thank you for having me. Hopefully it met your expectations, but
It did.
Like I said, we can talk forever about things, probably off to the side or maybe on the golf course some more. I need to get up there with the early bird group and play with you guys.
I do too. I haven't played much at all this year because I'm still young enough. I have a day job, so and do things like this. I appreciate those Polar magazines. That's going to be fun to leaf through. But yeah, if there's anyone watching this, if you have people you want on this show, people from your past and history that you admired, reach out to us and get that information to me. I'll reach out and try to get them on this show. We want to keep tractor pulling and the grassroots of it alive and help people understand what built this sport. It was good people like the Ropps. A name I didn't mention was George Hansen. There's just so many good people, and a Henderson, I think was a George Henderson as well, was a announcer. There's so many good people in this sport. I'm sure many of you have heard over the years. Thank you for joining us, and we'll talk to you next time.
Breaking Barriers.